As a woman, the biggest thing that I want is to feel safe, right? I want my masculine counterpart to make me feel safe. In order to do that, I can't have more power than him. It's like a non-starter. The powerful one is the one that provides the safety. And the way he does that is by making decisions, by being directional. It's like you can't have it both ways. Women that disrespect men obviously feel more powerful. Already, you're never going to get the things you want. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host Anya Shak here, and today I am back in my normal place. I'm here. Let's get into it. Mental load conversation part 2. Got some important insights and observations that I think will make sense of this conversation situation that men and women seem to be missing each other on. Women keep having this conversation and men aren't having it, and they're not even hearing it. And I think there's a general gist from women that's basically like women continuing to say that men need to be doing 50% of the what women are calling invisible household labor, and that's just it. And so my stance on this is that men do not need to be doing that, but it's not because of some like anti-female take. It's actually the most pro female take to double click into this mental load conversation and understand that is actually, I think it's not in the interest of women and femininity and women's fulfillment and satisfaction to continue having this mental load conversation, because ultimately what it does is it continues the unisexification of gender, right? It continues to collapse our sex differences. It continues to collapse who men are and who women are into this like humanoid, techno, futuristic person that is devoid of any sort of yin, yang, and soul, and it's heartbreaking. And like, I want nothing to do with it. And this conversation really goes hand in hand with the conversation of modernization. The mental load conversation wouldn't be something that is in the culture and in women's circles in the way that it is if it wasn't for the way in which we have modernized. And I'm not specifically saying that like all modernization is bad. I'm just saying that the way that we have modernized has been done by trying to eliminate sex differences. And I think there's a couple of people that have written on this topic, and I think it's super, super interesting. Okay. So this concept of invisible labor, okay, I was trying to get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. So just to understand, because I know a lot of women, when we say mental load, they're like, oh yeah, I totally know exactly what that means. A lot of men, we say, they're like, oh, I kind of get it. And some men, not at all, right? Mental load is, I think, a result of the stresses that women feel from trying to be hyper masculine while not letting go of their actual biology, which is feminine. So it's this weird oxymoronic thing where it's like we're doing things as women would, but we're trying to do it in this very hyper masculine world, and we're trying to fit into a hyper masculine frame. I'm going to talk about what I mean by that, and I think it's just really interesting to double click into. So mental load is a result of the stresses that women feel from doing invisible labor, right? Invisible labor is things like baking for PTA meetings and making cookies and making sure kids' dentist appointments are on track, making sure that they are invited to birthday parties, making sure that they plan the right birthday parties, making sure that they're having play dates, and making sure the school supplies list is perfect and it's exactly what the teacher has asked for. All of these types of things are indeed very female coded things because they are on the back of nurture, care, warmth, and kind of providing the internal fulfillment and satisfaction, right? So like inside of a family, inside of a relationship, right? All of the soft things that you would do to make sure that people feel warm and fulfilled, right? So because of modernization and the way things have gone down, now that women are in the workplace and they're doing things that are very external, right? Making money, doing basically participating in the like what was formerly the male sphere of life, uh, they are frustrated that because they are there doing all of that, men have not picked up those soft, invisible labor elements that basically they should have, is what is kind of like the perspective is like, well, because we went out into the men's world and we like now we're there, men should come into our world and be there too, and so we can all be the same. That's the fundamental flaw of this whole entire conversation. And some really great stuff that I read this week, I think is super fascinating. So, Mary Harrington wrote a piece. She called it, "It's not the mental load that sucks, it's shadow work." And I don't like the definition shadow work because I think it takes from what actual shadow work is, which is a Jungian concept of it's related to like when we heal our wounds and we make the unconscious conscious and we become more, in tune, fulfilled people. So I think shadow work is what that is. So not a great term. So I think invisible labor is fine. And I love Mary Harrington. I admire her, and I think she has inspired me greatly. And so her book Feminism Against Progress and her Substack Reactionary Feminist, I think she's really so on the nose around how modernization and progress for progress's sake has hurt relationships between men and women in such a significant, profound way. And so I think that's important. So in this piece, she was writing about how Ivan Illich wrote a book, or Illich wrote a book called Gender in 1982, and he basically examined like how basically women as women became subordinate in the context of industrial modernity, right? This idea that industrialism is interestingly genderless and sexist all at once, which is actually such a clear concept. It's like what I was saying before. It's like trying to look at men, and Alison Armstrong has this quote, it's like, stop treating him like a hairy woman. It's like women are trying to be successful in the hypermasculine sphere while not letting go of their hyper feminine drive to make sure every single thing is on the school supplies list, making sure the cake for the birthday party has the exact colors that the kid wants on his frosting, right? That's a beautiful female coded desire to want to provide that for the people that you love in your family. Men are not so detail oriented about so many things. Men are extremely detail oriented and focused on like the task at hand and what they're like focused towards achieving. But Chesterton said it. Women are the eternal generalists. Women are so good at doing, many different things all at once, but in a way of like, it's like women go really wide, whereas men might go really deep in something, right? And we need both. And so it's really interesting. So she was talking about how he was saying that modernity effectively reordered everything about men and women, right? So the foundational precondition for industrialization to actually work was this belief in this like genderless human, right? Any body could press the button or, do this or do that or make the machinery work. And that's interestingly very true. So, and I see that, right? So like I was talking about in another episode, I know this couple who they were both working at ad agencies in New York City, barely ever noticed any sort of gender differences, sex differences, right? And they were just, working away on their computers at their ad agency, thinking about headlines and taglines. And then they decided to move to rural Maine to do this project of restoring an old home. And then they started having babies. suddenly gender became so important. Suddenly, uh, she, with a new infant, wasn't going to be the one to put the roof up on the house, right? It was suddenly going to be him. It was going to be him for very specific reasons. And she was going to be nursing her baby for very specific reasons. And this just reality effectively goes away. The idea of the reality goes away, but the truth of the reality is maintained. And that's why we're in such a crisis and we're in such a mess here. So it's really interesting. And then they write, Mary writes, the unattainability of this genderless human gives rise to the mental load conversation, right? Because it's actually not attainable. So I made like a little metaphor here. It's basically like the marketing is that we're a more equal society because of this hyper industrialization and modernization. And, women can do what men can do, men can do what women can do, but the product experience is actually way, way, way more sexist because, and then I was just thinking about this too. Ultimately, if men and women were really on an equal playing field when it came to economic achievement, physical achievement, achievement in the external sphere, right? Like competition to gain resources, which is what has to happen externally so that the people internally can be safe and secure. If men and women really were on an equal playing field, and what I mean by that is like if boys had male teachers, right? If boys had initiation rights, if boys were kind of cheered on and said, yeah, you can do anything. Like the future is men and women. The future is boys and girls, right? If boys had male mentors, if they were given like apprenticeships during high school, right, with men that they admired, um, I've seen boys get super jazzed about anything that they're like football, woodworking, whatever. If they have a man that they admire and respect, taking time and energy to be with a young boy and teach him, this young boy, it's going to change his life, right? It's what boys need. So imagine if boys had all of that, like, right, in the same way that girls do, right? Because right now girls get so many things, girls who code, girls this, the future is female, 85% of teachers are female, 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 female. So if it was even, I don't think it would even be a competition. The boys would win. The boys would win because boys are naturally, biologically, much more prone to risk taking. They're way better risk takers. They're just more decisive. They're less people pleasy. They have a stronger inner confidence, right? Um, because they're biologically motivated for that external world, right? But because for the last however many decades we've just been helping girls and we haven't been helping boys, the contrary, we have been pushing boys down. It's like we're helping girls win at a masculine game and thereby denying the feminine elements that, were always very important. Now we're saying, okay, well, now that we've helped girls win the masculine game, now let's get boys to like do all this care work. Let's get boys to do all this invisible labor. Let's get boys to focus on like baking cookies and, PTA meetings and boys, I mean men. Like let's get men to start focusing on that. And it's just so interesting because now when you hear it like that, it's like, oh, no wonder that's not going to work. That doesn't make any sense because it's literally like, okay, go with me. This might be a little woo-woo, but it's literally like saying, let's help the sun do the moon thing, like be like the moon as much, or actually, let's flip it. Let's help the moon be as sun-like as possible, right? So that the sun is no longer that important. And now the moon has like taken on the role of the sun. But now let's just get the sun to like pick up the slack of like now what the moon can no longer do because the moon is doing the sun's job, right? And it's like I don't know. I just came up with that. But I guess the point of this is like, it's so silly to see this as a 50-50 thing. It's so silly to see this as interchangeable. The moon and the sun are not interchangeable and they are not in competition. They are in union and they're in sacred companionate, like harmony, right? And so I think that's really interesting. Okay. Now, I think that, like I've said this before, there's a real lack of fulfillment that lots of women were experiencing that happened during and after industrialization because women's work that was creative, meaningful, kept them around women that they knew and loved, kept them uh, participating in like status games that they had, right? Um, were taken from them. And the biggest example of this is like the weaving industry, right? The weaving industry, women were weavers for hundreds and hundreds of years upon thousands. Weaving was always women's work. It was taken into industry and computerized and machinerized, and you took that fulfillment away from women, right? Because there's something meaningful in that. And there's, I'm sure, a million examples of that. So women are foundationally lacking meaning and fulfillment. And so I'd argue like women are not finding it out in the external competitive sphere, right? But they think they are because they're on hypermasculine programming. But like, and so because they're not finding meaning out there, they're trying to maintain meaning through all of the invisible labor that their womb is actually driving them to do, like make sure their kid has exactly the frosting flavors he wants on his cake, right? And it's like, interestingly enough, because she no longer has time to bake the cake, she no longer has time to make it fresh, from scratch. Now she has to call and order it. And so there's this conversation too around how now women are just trying to make meaning out of these administrative tasks in order to make things feel warmer and nicer and better inside the home because they no longer have time to do the fulfilling work that used to be done, right? And it's interesting. Yvonne Illich argues in that book, Gender, that, gender used to be vernacular. That's the name, that's the way that he talks about it, vernacular gender. And so what this means is there's a social polarity that is fundamental, where timing, tools, tasks, forms of speech, gestures, and perceptions are all highly gender specific. And I think that gets into the conversation around the sacred spaces, right? The sacred sex spaces. And so relationships are not hierarchical between men and women. They're not. They're like the right and the left hand, the sun and the moon. And so that's what I was talking about. It's really interesting to me because as we've collapsed this vernacular gender, these vernacular sex roles and gender roles, a lot of weird stuff is happening. So even an example, I was sitting at I was meeting up with friends last week after I came back from my trip, and we were all having dinner, and we met like a friend of a friend who ended up coming out to dinner with us. So it was a whole bunch of girls and a guy. And she was talking about something around her relationship, and she shared something a little bit more graphic. And I was a little caught off guard by it because I thought it was inappropriate to share that in front of a man. Like I thought it was inappropriate. And it just goes to show the complete collapse of the boundaries and the sacred like segregation of our sex spaces, right? I thought that it was so inappropriate. And so it speaks to forms of speech and gestures like Illich was talking about, in that like for a long period of time, that there were really, and I think rightfully so, there are really important things that we do with our same-sex peers that we don't do with the opposite sex. Um, it's like when women, there's a couple of videos online when women first entered these like what were like men's only after work pubs, right? It was like a blue collar kind of like workman's bar. And there was a lounge there that women were already in, but there was like this back room bar that was just for men. It's like a men's space. And women entered this space, and these men were talking about like how it's not that I don't want you in here because I think you're less than me. It's that this isn't the only time I get to use expletive language and to say things without being judged or feeling judged. Like, I don't want you in here because I can't talk like this when I go home because my wife's at home, and I don't talk like this in front of my wife. I only talk like this in front of men. And I think it's so unfortunate that people don't understand these sacred dynamics that used to go on always, right? They still go on, and I'm sure many cultures, some more religious communities as well. Um, but yeah, that caught me off guard. I thought that was really interesting. Mary goes on to say, women are right to sense there's something frustratingly inescapable about the residue of uh, one time of richer work that used to exist for women long ago. And I think that's what women are craving. So, and this conversation also goes hand in hand with the dual income conversation, right? Industrialization, modernization loves the idea of dual income, right? Men and women aren't different. The only thing that matters is productivity. And Illich was actually talking about how, relationships between men and women are like my right and my left hand. They're obviously so different, or like my right and my left brain, they're obviously so different and they're complementary. But when you think about a computer or a machine, the machine doesn't recognize the difference. That's just it. That is the metaphor. That is the entire essence of it all, is that the modernity and the commodification of things doesn't recognize the deeply spiritual differences between us. And I think we can feel how different people are trying to put men in a box, and others are putting women in a box, and it's like, oh, women need to just do this and men need to just be this. And then we hear people like Mary, and then we hear figures like Jordan Peterson and other elders that have so much wisdom, like Stephen Jenkinson. I just picked up his new book, Matrimony. He's this man he's like the death guy. He talks about the ritual and the ceremony that we're missing in life, and how we have this like really messed up relationship to death in the West. And I can't wait to get more into that. And it's like these are the people that are helping us try to mother and father our culture. Like what we need is mothering and fathering of our culture. And it's they will look at each other as complements, right hand, left hand, right? There's no getting around biology. And so, and then there's just some more conversations too. I wanted to just make a couple last little points, right? So in the first part of this, I talked about how this conversation about mental load doesn't land because also women are presenting it in like this soup of disrespect. I think women foundationally don't understand men and how men see respect, and they unknowingly disrespect men all the time. And even just the idea of saying, I need you to do all these things that are in my head is basically like, I need you to be a woman. I don't care that we're completely different. I don't care that maybe I'm the left hand and you're the right hand, and I'm not willing to see what, maybe is valuable that you could be sharing with me and telling me and helping me with here, right? I'm not respecting you in any way, shape, or form, right? And so I think that's a big one. I talk way more about respect and like the definitions and all of that in that first part. Check it out. The second point here, yeah, just to like round this out, the biological issues. So it's so funny. We're coming at this mental load conversation with an innately pre-industrial desire, but we're trying to fit it into this like narrative of modernity, which just doesn't work. And so it's like the oxymoron of all of that. It's like the gynocentric approach to trying to like be hyper masculine. It doesn't make any sense. 50-50 doesn't exist, right? And then there's this last point that a lot of women in the space, when talking about mental load, share is that, oh, men don't want to do, PTA bake sale because it's low status, because like it's female coded and like they just think it's way low status. I actually think it's not that at all. I think that men don't fit in to these spaces that are women's spaces usually, right? So it's like there's an example of, there's a text chain going on with mostly moms, right? With all moms about like bake sales and whatever. And then suddenly like a dad shows up in that space. Half of that space is logistics, but the other half is emotional connection between women, as it always is. It's women don't ever have a logistics only space. And so suddenly now there's a man in that space, and men, I think, are very sensitive to how wrong that is to be in a female only space in the same way that when I was there at the dinner table and this woman was talking about something quite expletive in front of a man, I was like, wow, that's really something's wrong here. It's not supposed to be like this. He's not supposed to be here for this conversation, slash, because he is here, you shouldn't be saying this kind of stuff. And so I think men are actually really sensitive to that. And I also think that like men are just like, I'm not good at remembering the 12, the 12 colors of frosting that my kid really wants, right? It's not like, stop trying to get me to do, to be the moon or to act like the moon when I'm the sun. And you, like, if you could only just see what I'm capable of and how I power the world and like all of the incredible capabilities that I have, like you wouldn't be asking me to do that if you actually respected me, right, as the son. And I think that's really interesting and important. So ultimately, I think the concept of mental load is a loaded term that doesn't help anyone, and it doesn't actually have an effective conversation. It doesn't make space for an effective conversation. I think the invisible labor shouldn't be called that. I think it shouldn't be called that. I think it's just the things that caretakers and nurturers and, females, women, right? Biological women are more inclined towards because it matters to them. That kind of stuff matters to them in the same way that other things matter to men. And here's the thing, too. There's a safety piece in this as well that I think is missed. And I'm going to try to, it's like it's just coming to me now. So I'm going to try to like get it out. As a woman, the biggest thing that I want is to feel safe, right? With my partner, I want my masculine counterpart to make me feel safe. In order to do that, I can't have more power than him. So it's like a non-starter. Women that disrespect men, women that don't understand those nuances of sacred spaces and separateness in that way, they obviously feel more powerful. And it's a non-starter. Already, you're never going to get the things you want. You're never going to land with a man in the way that is really meaningful to you. Your conversations are never going to land, right? The requests, the desires. But when you really respect him and you really understand that, yeah, the powerful one is the one that provides the safety. The powerful one is the one that provides the safety. And the way he does that is by making decisions, by being directional, right? And so it's like you can't have it both ways. And I think a man that is really sees men and women as this harmonious yin yang complementary force, he will look to her for her timing, for her understanding of nuance, for her intuition, for all of the wonderful things that a woman brings to the table. And he will look to all of that and he will take all of that into consideration in order to direct and make decisions and provide that safety. And so there's so much that a man does or that he wants to do that will help a woman do what it is that she biologically wants to do, which is like bake the cakes and do the things and make sure everyone's warm and happy, so that there is no mental load, if you will. There is no more invisible labor. It is just labor. It is just like loving labor. It is that, right? And then he is doing his labor. And so, yeah, I think there's that dynamic has to get clarified. And that dynamic does not mean that a woman cannot be brilliant and a scholar and be a teacher and be someone that is, you know, well loved and respected in her community for achieving something important to her, right? It's so like that goes hand in hand with respect. There's no reason it has to be one or the other. So I could go on forever, but I hope this has been interesting. I hope this has somehow landed, maybe not perfectly, the mental load conversation. Love to hear what y'all think. Until the next one. Hello, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm so happy to be here bringing my wisdom, my truths, all the research I do into pop culture and evolutionary psych and beyond to bring men and women the information that we all need to know to find that ultimate harmony with each other. This is the mission. This is why I'm here. This is what I believe in. So if you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things. Either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.